And we're back, continuing our interview with zombie apocalypse survivor Robin Sontag.
So I should just pick up where I left off?
That would be perfect. You had just left your car.
Right. I had bravely wrapped a pair of jumper cables around a single zombie and took off down the road with no direction or plan.
Well, I'm sure that may have seemed like a bad idea in hindsight, but I don't know what else you could have done.
Irrelevant. Like I said, I went running down the road trying to get away from something that moved about as fast as I could walk. At that time, all around the world, every person who had been struck down by the source of Z-Day and hadn't been killed in their sleep was waking up. The zombies had a day's head start on us, and they'd already picked apart anyone not hidden away from their grimy, decaying hands. Hearing it now, 4.5 miles doesn't seem like much. I remember going from a sprint to a jog to a fast walk to a near stop, and it taking me an eternity before I came across blazes. The distance seemed to last forever. In my memory, it runs together, starting and stopping in definite places, but the in-between stuff I've completely forgotten. Now that I know the actual distance I ended up traveling, it makes me feel a little embarrassed that I ended up as I did. Remember, though, I'd thrown up 2 days ago and had nothing to eat since.
I hadn't forgotten.
Add on to the exhaustion from running on an empty tank with a heavy bag of clothes, Texas winter heat, and the fear of the living dead, and you have me only a shade or two away from death.
Oh, that sounds horrible. It must have been terrible.
It was a lot of things. My memory starts clearly right as I called out to a rapidly blurring thing pounding on the door, obviously forgetting about everything that had just happened. That just might be the dumbest thing I've ever done. It's certainly in the top 5. The thing turned and moaned, and I knew I had just screwed up.
Well, what happened next?
I walked up to the zombie. I took a conveniently placed crowbar lying on the pavement, and I split his skull in 2.
Really?
No.
Oh.
I figured then that I needed to get away. I spun quickly, but I lost my footing and hit the ground pretty hard. My exhaustion had caught up with me, and the world above was spinning like a top. The human body's a funny thing. I was too beaten to get up and get away, but not only can I remember seeing the sign out front spinning, and it really wasn't, it just looked that way, my hearing worked as well as, if not better, than it normally did. I heard a step, drag, moan, step, drag, as the body knocking on the door made its way to a meal that pretty much deserved to be eaten. Step, drag, step. And at that point, the thing's silhouette eclipsed the sun and the sign above me. I just shut my eyes and hoped it would be quick.
What is that?
That's the sound of second chances. So there's a bell attached to the door, so it would ring every time it's opened. Most stores had them back then, but rarely did people notice because the noise never meant anything. I opened my eyes at the sound in time to see the featureless oval that was the thing's head disappear in a second, much louder sound, that of the shotgun discharging. 2 strong arms grabbed my own and pulled me back into the store.
That was Chuck Blaze, wasn't it?
It was.
Well, why didn't the zombies get to him? They were right outside his store, and they knew he was inside.
Chuck's life was spared on Z-Day because the doors were pull doors. Otherwise, the zombie killed with a shotgun would have let itself in 2 days ago after the first pound or 2. Blazes was built in 1950, and the town of Hallettsville was more or less built around it. Chuck's grandfather was a World War II vet who came home to Houston after the war. He learned to lay brick and then borrowed a little money and moved out to the country. He built his country store as a middle point between Houston and San Antonio, 2 very important cities at the time. Pretty soon, a few other people moved out in the area to farm, so Mr. Blaze built a feed store, then put in some gas pumps, and even built a small one-room building to serve as the town barber shop. The entire town basically owed its existence to Blaze, to hear Chuck tell it. When the store was passed to Chuck's dad in 1978, he added an aluminum can recycling center to bring in a little extra cash flow. Apparently it made enough to keep itself running, but not much more. Chuck's dad was going to pass it down to him eventually, but because of Z-Day, I suppose that never formally happened. Anyway, once inside Chuck's place, a cool, wet sheet on my head, he got me some water to drink and a little beef jerky and began asking me questions. Who was I? Where was I from? Did I know what the f*** was going on?
Well, what did you tell him?
Well, I thanked him. I gave him my name and asked if the radio played anything other than the polka version of a birthday song. He said it was a tape, the radio's dead, and that if I meant any disrespect at all, he'd take the price of the beef jerky and bottle of water out of my and throw me back outside.
Well, then what happened, though?
I apologized. I thanked him for saving my life, and I shut up for a bit after that. In retrospect, the guy was about 6'4" and holding a shotgun. Even someone as heat drunk as I was should have known to ask if he liked polkas before I started criticizing it. The tape ran its course, and he didn't flip it back over. I started feeling better not long after, and he helped me to my feet. I asked him if he knew if anyone else was alive. But before he could answer, there was a knock on the door. Chuck moved the blinds. It was another zombie drawn to us from the shotgun blast. Chuck turns to me and says, "I think it's for you."
Is that really what he said?
Yeah, why?
You're not setting me up for another sarcastic response or joke or something, right?
Not right now.
It just seems like he'd be a bit more serious, all things considered.
You never knew Chuck, so I can understand if you think I'm embellishing a little here. I'm not. This, I would soon come find out, was Chuck's way of dealing with the stress of living in a post-apocalyptic world. No matter how grave the situation, he'd flash that stupid grin and crack a one-liner like something out of an old action movie. He made light of pretty much anything he could. Anyway, I told him that if these things followed conventional zombie rules, then to take this one out, we'd have to destroy the brain. It seemed to work on the one Chuck had killed earlier, but we were not sure if we were going to shoot the newcomer or not. We just didn't have any idea how many of them were out there, and if they would be drawn to us by more firing of the shotgun. Also, with a single zombie, we could try and figure out just how fast they can move, and if they responded to any other outside stimuli, like if they tracked with sight or sound or smell, or if they had some sort of zombie sense that was gained the living never had. "We can take the back exit," Chuck said, motioning behind the counter.
Well, were you scared? Just hours before you tried hiding from a zombie in the back seat of your car, but now you're gonna try to tease one into showing you just how fast it can go?
You would be amazed at the confidence that can be gained from having a big guy with a shotgun on your side. By now, I'd already seen one die. The initial shock seemed to have worn off, and I could see that the damn things were too stupid to open doors and not strong enough to break them down. Sure enough, as soon as we walked out of the building, the zombie at the door guessed that its food wasn't inside anymore, and we could hear it staggering towards us through the gravel and into the grass. It did not drag its feet as much as the one before it, but it still moved slow. Really slow. When it came to where we could see it, we watched to see if it would speed up or do anything different than what we'd seen him do before. It moaned and shuffled, but by itself didn't feel like a threat.
Well, but what about later? Most of the reports I've read say that the zombies were dangerous and were strong and tough, and they could move just as fast, if not faster, than normal people.
Well, that would be later, when they became runners. But only a few days into this, they were still stiff from rigor mortis or something like that. I was never an expert on how they lived. I just got really good at putting them down. When we deemed it was a threat that could be, easily dealt with, I casually asked Chuck if he had a crowbar or something I could use as a weapon. I said it was so I could try to take out the zombie without wasting ammo or drawing any more zombies to us when the noise was made, but honestly, I just wanted to one-up the big bastard by killing it without a gun. Stupid, granted, but I did a lot of stupid things back then. Chuck said he had something around back by the recycling building that would do the trick. Out there, leaning against the wall, was a snow shovel. He used it to scoop cans up for recycling. All the while, though, this zombie is shuffling towards us, but not so quick that I'm not starting to grip the handle tightly as it drew near. It moaned, drawing close to us. Yeah, that was the moment I realized I had no idea what to do. I could feel myself freezing. I locked up again. "Go for its legs," Chuck said. "Knock it down, sweep its feet." I actually did as he said. I took the shovel to its legs in a sweeping motion and crumpled it on the ground. "Now bring it down on its head." Like I was in a trance, I did as he said. This is a moment that's frozen in my memory, bringing that shovel down and caving in its skull. I don't remember what its face looked like, but I can clearly see the red and gooey outline that bordered my shovel. It's funny, I look back on that moment every day and wonder how things would have been if Chuck wasn't there.
Well, he was, and, I also think that we're reaching a good stopping point here.
Wait. I also want to add that right after I flattened that thing's head and I heard Chuck's shotgun go off, he had just killed another zombie, and this one wrapped in jumper cables.
Really? The one from earlier, right?
The same. It was this shot that alerted a survivor in one of the nearby houses who came running out to greet us. That's how we met Agatha Barnes. She was almost 70 and the first person that Chuck and I found before we headed to the castle.